On this channel, it's no secret that I love talking about and featuring content about hardware. This video is going to be no exception to that, and what I wanted to show you is some of the techniques that I used on my recent EP that I released. So it's only a short EP, it's available on SoundCloud, there's a link in the description if you haven't listened to it already. Those beats when they were first made sounded very different to after they've been put through some of my hardware. So for those of you that work in a DAW, I think this will be especially insightful because I arranged these beats in Ableton and then ran them through my gear and it made them sound much better. And for those of you that use hardware already, hopefully it'll just be interesting for you to see my flow. So there's a combination of a few pieces of gear I'm going to be using today. I think I'm going to be using the Analog Heat 2, the SP202 for one particular effect, which is absolutely amazing. I haven't used the 202 much recently, so it was really good to include that on this EP. And then I'm going to use my 404 Mark II, but that's mainly just so I can link the audio to my phone for recording purposes. I may use that to add a couple of effects as well, but we'll see. So let's get to my desk. I'm going to get my gear set up and then I'll run some of the beats from that EP through and show you the difference that it makes. There's not really going to be a set structure here. I'm just going to kind of show you roughly what I did when I was doing my EP, and then I might have a further play around and experiment as well. Okay, so we're on Wobblecam and we're over at my gear rack, which has proven to be really useful. So first of all, SP404 Mark II up here. As you can see, I'm running this skinless at the moment and I actually really dig the clean look of it. I think I'm going to get some of the DJ Tech Tools fatty knobs for the top just to match this one, or maybe a different color. But yeah, really digging how this looks at the moment, so let's get that on the table. Next up, well, this is the next one down, so let's grab the Analog Heat 2. I've talked about this quite a lot on the channel already. It's expensive, but what it does is pretty magical. I really like having a hands-on kind of mixing console, and this really ticks that box. So yeah, it's kind of a nice to have piece of gear. It's not really essential, but yeah, I really like using it. And it's one of those pieces of gear, this is what I always say about it: once you own it, you run everything through it. One shots, drum breaks, samples, beats. It's just great for everything. So yeah, we'll get that in the chain. And lastly, a piece of gear which I haven't used much for a long time, the SP202, and that's mainly because I bought the MS1, and I'll just show you the MS1 quickly. This was actually the predecessor to the SP202, and it's the start of the SP series, this device. This is what kicked it all off. And the great thing about this is that you can apply the sample grades on the through signal, so you don't have to record into it to get the sample grade sound. It doesn't sound quite as good as the SP202, and it doesn't sound quite as good as actually recording it onto the internal memory, but it saves you so much time when you're processing beats and processing audio. It's just brilliant for that. So the convenience of it makes this a really good piece of gear, and that's why I haven't really been using the 202, because the 202 you have to record everything in and it's a very slow machine. So yeah, I usually use this now for my sample grade processing, but I thought I'd better give the 202 a bit of love because it's not been out for a while. So here's how the chain's going to work. I've got my beats in Ableton, which obviously are on my computer, so we need to get the audio from my computer into my gear. So how are we going to do that? Well, I've got an audio interface here. This has got a number of outputs on the back. Can I get around there and show you guys? Basically, it's got your RCA or phono if you want to come out the back, and then it's got two jacks for speakers as well. So I'm going to use those two jacks. So the two jack cables will come out the back of my audio interface, into the back of the Analog Heat. On the back here, on inputs and outputs, we've got jacks as well. So we can go straight into the back of there with jacks. So I'm going to use patch cables to connect my audio interface to my Analog Heat. If you don't know what patch cables are, it's basically these guys. So the short little cables, they've got a jack on each end. So I'll come out the left and right, that'll take two cables, and then we can move along to the next piece of gear. So obviously, like I mentioned, the out of this is jack as well, a 1/4 inch jack. So we'll go out the back of there, 1/4 inch jack. And this is where things get a little tricky because the SP202 only has the red and white RCA or phono inputs and outputs. So we need a cable that can go from 1/4 inch jack to phono. Luckily I've got some. You can get these as cables. So you can see here at one end we've got the two 1/4 inch jacks left and right, and the other end is phono left and right, or RCA left and right. I never know the difference. Is there a difference between phono and RCA? Let me know in the comments below if you know that. And then it's the same output on the SP202, and the inputs on the 404 Mark II a jack as well, 1/4 inch jack. So we need this cable again, and that's going to go out of the back of the 202 and into the 404. And then the final bit of the process is USB out of this to my phone to use as a recording device. So what I'll do now is get all these wires hooked up off camera, and then I'll show you exactly how it looks when they're all daisy chained together. Okay, so as I've described, I've gone through that process and I hooked all those up. So you can see here, the green and yellow out of the back of my audio interface and into the analog heat. Then we go out the analog heat and into the back of the 202, out the 202, and into the back of the 404 Mark II. So that's going to be a really cool chain. There's loads of opportunities to add flavor and texture and just overall lo-fi goodness. And yeah, this is exactly how I set things up for my EP. So it's going to sound very similar when I'm running these beats through it. I was really happy with the way the sound came out. It was kind of in the middle of like lo-fi and clean. So I was really happy with that. That's the kind of sound I like. I don't like really crunching stuff up, and I don't like sterile, clean stuff either. So I think these things really worked well. Now, I've just realized another thing that I need to do is actually get all these powered up. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. There we go. We've got the analog heat on, the 202 on, and the 404 Mark II on as well. So let's go ahead and get some beats running through this and I can show you the difference. Okay, so we're at the gear here. I've got my project in Ableton. This one is called Alone. It's the first track from the EP. And the first thing that I'm going to do is basically just show you everything absolutely vanilla, so no effects on it whatsoever, and you can get an idea of what it was sounding like straight out of Ableton. Now, on some of these tracks, I did do some sample processing on the SPs before it went into Ableton, so we do already have a little bit of flavor, but yeah, these things are going to make a big difference, you're going to see over the course of this video. So sorry I'm on wobble cam here. It's just the easiest way for me to talk into the back of the mic on the camera and also show you guys exactly what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and press play on this and I can show you what this sounds like vanilla. Straight away you can probably hear that we're getting a lot of noise from the SP202. That's just kind of a normal thing with this device, unfortunately, but I think it adds quite a nice character to the beats anyway. There's not much punch in that beat. It's not sounding as warm and as nice as I'd like it to, so there definitely needs some treatment doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the analog heat. So we're going to turn it on, make sure that's turned on. And I'm going to use the clean boost. I pretty much always use clean boost on this device. That's my favorite circuit. Underneath you've got the individual controls for that. You've got drive, the wet level, the dry and wet mix, and then over here we've got equalization, low and high, and these dials do different things on these different circuits, so they've got their own character to complement whatever circuit you're on, so they slightly change depending on which one you've got selected here. Obviously I'm always on clean boost, so they always do the same thing for me. And then you've got your filters here, so you've got low pass, high pass, notch filters. You can play around with those as well. I think sometimes I was using a bit of a low pass filter. You can see that moving on the screen here, but probably only a little bit because I'll get onto this in a minute, but I was actually doing most of that with the 202. So yeah, we'll put this on now and I'll show you what happens when I change these dials as well. I'll show you the effect that it has on the overall beat. Okay, so I tried to embellish some of the sounds there. I did a lot of low. You could really hear it bringing out that low, and the highs as well. You could really hear that pulling out those snares out of the mix and really adding a nice crunch to them and a nice kind of smack sound to them as well. So that is pretty much what the analog heat is doing. It's like a tactile mixing area basically. That's the main way that I use it, and I think it's especially good on full beats like this. You can really change the character of a beat quite easily. So moving on now, let's play around with the SP202. So we heard what it was like without. What I'm going to do in this one is play that beat again, and I'll put the filter 1 on. So this is a low pass filter, and it just adds so much character. It's a really, really nice sounding low pass filter. It's the combination of the unit, the age of it, the circuitry, everything all combined just makes a really nice tone, adds a really nice kind of lo-fi sound to your beats. I don't like to overdo it with this. I don't like to ruin the mix. I'll show you what you can do with this filter, and then I'll show you pretty much where I use it to get my mix sounding nice. So let's put that on. Okay, so you could hear there that when the filter is over to the right, it really adds a kind of snap to the beat. And then when you move it over to the left, you can get a real muddiness to it. And I kind of settled somewhere in the middle. So we get a little bit of that snappiness and a little bit of the lo-fi goodness as well. And just the overall noise that this unit makes as well, it just adds to the whole sound of it. So I did that on every single beat on this EP. I ran it through all these settings like I've just shown you. Then the last part of the puzzle is the SP404 Mark II. So I did actually use my compressors on this. I have my bus 2 and 3 set up to run 2 compressors. So if I go to Shift and Effects, you can see here I've got a compressor and then 303 vinyl sim, which is using compressor as well. So let's go ahead and add those. That's the last part of the puzzle. This is going to add a lot of noise when the beat isn't playing, but it should soften out when the beat is playing. So that was the power that the double compressor bus effects have on my beats there. They just really pull everything together and add a nice warmth to the overall mix. So that was sounding really, really nice then. So one final thing that I wanted to show you, I didn't do this too much, but I could add another effect on bus 1. That'll affect the signal coming into the unit. So we'll get to have both the compressors and another MFX as well. So let's just add 404 vinyl sim for this one. That's quite a common one which I like to use. I like to get a bit of wobble in my beats. So we'll play that again. I'll turn all these to 0 and then we'll add them in and you can see the difference that makes as well. But overall, this is getting close to the final sound that I had with that particular EP that I've just released. And yeah, let's see how this sounds. So there we go, guys. That is the power of hardware. I think it's absolutely incredible, even for running beats through like that. I only ended up doing one beat at the end because the video started to get really, really long, so I didn't have much time to show you any other beats. But if you did want to listen to the EP, the link is in the description, like I mentioned earlier. All those beats will run through that chain, so hopefully that gives you an idea of specifically what that chain can sound like. Some of the drums that I used on this EP are from my packs on spvids.com. If you want to go ahead and check those out, there's a link in the description. That's the main way I'm funded here making videos like this, so I'd really appreciate it if you could go and check those out. Thanks massively to everyone that visited the store last month and took advantage of the sale that I had on. The sales of the packs go a long way, so I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to sign off on this one. I hope it showed you DAW heads how you can change the sound of a beat with hardware and get some really nice flavour into it. And for those of you that are already on the hardware vibes, hopefully it was interesting to see my flow. Big shout out to all my members. Thank you all for your support. I will see you again in another video very, very soon.